Hey everybody, it's the Commodore from the Clan of the Grey Wolf, and you are watching the weekly Wringer series here on clanofthegreywolf.com. Now, great conversation this week as always, and I can't wait to get right into it. Lots of great things to talk about. I love asking the kind of questions that I did last week that really get us into the mode where we can do some heavy-duty nostalgia, but I really like hearing about your personal stories. You know, hearing about the things that brought gaming into your life, so on and so forth. Sometimes it's too easy just to get wrapped up in the things that we talk about in the day-to-day, you know, here at Clan of the Grey Wolf, with all the games that are out and all the games that are around. And it's really nice to be able to take some time and actually just talk about our lives and talk about the things that happen. So I like it. I get to know you guys a lot better, which is great. Hopefully you get to know me a little bit better too, and we get to share some stories about nostalgic bliss, as it were. So and today is no different. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to go through the contributions from the community, of which there were so many great stories. Try to make some highlights of things that really I think brought a smile to my face, and I hope brought a smile to yours as well. I will answer last week's question, which was about gaming during the school days. I'll give you my own little version of that and tell you a few stories of my own. And then I would also like to ask a question for next week that gets a little bit more back on to schedule for a very, very highly anticipated game, and specifically your reaction to it. So let's see. So let's start things out as I like to do here in the Weekly Wringer. And those of you that have been watching for a while know that I like to start the show out by just basically, spending a little bit of time to actually welcome some of the new viewers. I always try to welcome folks that are new to the community so that everyone feels welcome and really feels like this is a sense of community. And most of you say you really like that, so that's a great thing. Very glad to have all of you on board. First, let me welcome Vulcan Assassin. I thought that was a pretty cool name, by the way. Vulcan Assassin also talked about the project was it a New Year's project? I don't remember specifically if it was a New Year's project or kind of a resolution, let's say, of really taking the back catalog of games that are stacked up along the lines. And we talked about this last week, right? How many of those games are in your back catalog you haven't even begun, maybe you haven't even taken out the shrink wrap yet. Well, Vulcan Assassin has taken out those games, written them all down, and has decided it's no more. I'm not going to be buying any new games until I can get back through that back catalog. And I would say it's absolutely an awesome project, one that I think is enviable, and one if I did myself, I would never finish any games ever, and I certainly would never buy any new games, and that would put me generations behind and not just games behind. So I think I probably wouldn't be able to do it myself, but I think it's great, and I think it also does pay homage to the fact that if somebody got it right from our question last week and really was able to harness the power of some of the older games that are out there now in a very new way, I think you'd have something very powerful on your hands. So welcome to you, Vulcan Assassin, and thank you for the contribution. Ace of Opus, welcome to you as well. I thought that was a pretty cool name too, Ace of Opus. Awesome, cool. And let's see, this one was an interesting one. So how many of you remember the old search engine Lycos? Because I remember that, but I don't know that I ever really used it. Maybe I did once or twice. And I distinctly remember Lycos having Lycos had a contest right before I think it went under, where you could win a trip to tour the world with Anna Kournikova, who was at the time actually #1 in the world in women's tennis, and I was a huge women's tennis fan, a huge tennis fan. So as soon as that came on, that was the only time I ever remember using Lycos. Anyway, why am I telling you this story? Because this week we actually have, I'm going to say it's Mingen Lycos, before I say anything stupid. If I got it wrong, I will definitely fix it. But anyway, welcome to you as well. Just the Lycos end of that just made me think of Lycos. I don't know why. Anyway, before I get into any more really boring little side quests here in terms of talking about other things that don't matter toward the questions that I've actually asked, let me take a step back and let's actually answer that question from last week. Last week's question really centered around, do you guys, do you remember gaming at school? And how did you go about gaming in school? And for those of you that are still in school, and I do primarily mean, elementary, middle school, right, primary school, right, and then in high school as well. Now, you all had some really interesting ideas because I knew what my experience was, and I just thought, as is custom now here in the Weekly Ringer, that I'd always ask you guys if you have the same experiences, because I think in some ways it brings us together as a community. Several of you tied the idea together that several of us have the same experiences, and we might have thought that we were the only ones that had them. That is exactly what the Weekly Ringer is all about. It should be, show who you are, say who you are, and I think you're going to find a lot of people that feel exactly the same way as you do, and I think it's great. So let me go and kick things off with the comment by Lord of Nothing, who talked about, and this was a story that touched me particularly because of the idea of meeting someone's best friend because of gaming, specifically in the case of Lord of Nothing, Yu-Gi-Oh, which I know was very popular for a while. But how cool is that, right? Just because of gaming in the middle of school, at the lunch table, or what have you, you kick off a friendship that hopefully will last a very long time. Although it was not gaming specifically that brought Rue and myself together as friends way back when. It certainly didn't hurt that both of us absolutely loved gaming, and I think the Clan of the Grey Wolf is in many ways a testament to the fact that if you could see little 7th grade versions of Rue and myself talking about video games, I'm not sure that the conversation will be much different than it would be today. But that might just indicate our sincere immaturity. Anyway, thank you for sharing that, Lord of Nothing. I think that's a great story. Arduous Eternity was the first person to talk about the idea of, of everything being confiscated. We couldn't game at school. What are you, crazy? They take everything away. Fair enough. Several of you echoed those sentiments, and I think that's probably valid for a lot of folks out there. Luckily, where I went to school, that wasn't an issue. We could bring in things like that. I think we just couldn't be disruptive. There were times when questions got asked what we were doing with those particular cards, because as many of you also highlighted, they were not necessarily generally accepted by the population. It's just a matter of, you can't have them, or you could have them. But even if they were accepted, there were a lot of questions asked, like, are you gambling on them? Is there, some kind of element to, I don't know, ancient Nordic religion in what you're doing? I mean, it could be any of those kinds of questions. You guys know what I'm talking about. Point is, once you kind of got folks' worries away about those kinds of things, we didn't have any problem bringing games to school. Sorry to hear, Arduous Eternity, and several others of you, that you weren't able to bring anything in, because I think that's a missed opportunity, let's say, as you can see, for all the great memories that so many of us actually have. Furious George, talk about something that I have to say, I do not condone this kind of behavior. But Furious George actually talked about skipping out to go and play. Now, first of all, I never skipped class to play games. So those of you that are still in school, stay in school. The Commodore says stay in school. But I absolutely understand, I mean, it's like you get to that point where you're just like, man, why do I need to go to class when I could just be here right now just gaming and going nuts? And I know that several class periods where we actually were allowed to game, we certainly didn't want to go to the next class after that because, we really wanted to keep our games going. And a lot of times, as many of you said, the games ran longer and we couldn't get them done in a class period time. So anyway, Furious George skipped out of school to play, which is an interesting little side note, but don't do that, kids. Sonic Rose talked about the very novel concept, very novel, of playing pretend, right? So some of the best gaming that happens at school actually happens to be, and that leads, I think, into some of the gaming that you out there and I are familiar with, is playing pretend, right? Having, Sonic Rose shared an awesome story, I think, about being in the woods and kind of separated, and the ability to kind of have these kinds of thoughts and really let your imagination run wild is fairly easy. And I think that's great. That's part of what. That's part of one of the reasons why I love video games so much, because I think it really helps people develop wonderful imaginations. And I think pretend time, as silly as it sounds, I think back to when I was a child, and I'm sure many of you could do the same thing, that some of the things that you did during pretend time, even if it was during school, were some pretty cool memories. So I want to thank Sonic Rose for bringing that up as well. Nightcrawler. This was a really cool story, and I just thought this was great. Not just because he mentioned Star Wars customizable card game, which I will get to a story about in a little while, but mentioned that there was no place to play, right? And there's this great story about weaving a mat together, and maybe not necessarily weaving per se, and then putting Imperial and Rebel signs on it, which would connote the particular side you were playing for. And I just thought that was so awesome. That's one of those great, and I hope, Nightcrawler, that you still have that mat, and maybe you don't use it anymore, but I hope you have it for a long, long time to remember, because I think that's just awesome. I still have a lot of the cards that I had a long time ago, even though they're in lots of big piles and things like that. And I kind of wish I had that money back. But in any case, we have memories instead, and I thank you for sharing that. I thought that was a really cool story, and it just, for me, that is one of those great nostalgic tales, right? That one of those things that really helped to put those rose-colored glasses on your childhood. So thank you for sharing that, Nightcrawler. That was great. Mr. K shared another one of those. This is just another great story. For those of you that don't go through all the comments and don't read it, you're really missing out. Mr. K told a story of band period, which I thought was awesome, where you go in and it's after a performance, right? And you have the free day. The teacher's going to give you the free day, and there's a lot of TVs out, and people can watch movies or do whatever they want. And all of us had those times. And the band director encouraged you to bring in game systems to connect them and have fun and just kind of have a party. And I remember so many of those during school, and I thought those were great times. The only thing I would say is this. I'll tell you what. I'll reserve that story. Let me come back, because I think that's a pretty cool. It happened enough times that I could talk about what happened during band period when we would have those free days, just like Mr. K was talking about. It was. I think that was a really cool story, and the idea that it didn't happen after one of the performances went particularly badly. I think that's really cool. You learned that the privilege of having this game day was something you had to earn, and I think that's fantastic. So, anyway, thank you, Mr. K, for sharing that. That was a really cool memory. This might have been my favorite one, and I don't know if it was necessarily for any reason other than I just kind of had a very vivid picture in my mind as this commenter went through it. It was not only just vivid in my mind, but I really did see that kind of nostalgic shine to it, right? As if it were my own experience, because I've had very similar experiences to this. Sandcoffin69 talked about the idea of this hidden place, this place that you kind of had to weave your way into, almost clandestinely, kind of find your way into. And once you got there, you were sort of hidden, and that would be a place where you could actually pull out the Game Boys that would otherwise be forbidden at school, and be able to play them. And once you did that, you could kind of be safe, right? and you can play with a bunch of friends. So it's almost this meeting place where people get together to enjoy these games together. And I think that is just awesome. It's almost like you just want some cheesy music to start playing while you're reading that post. For those of you that haven't read Sandcoffin 69's story about how they got into this crawl space and with the rope and everything,